Hey friends, I have a vivid memory from the early 1980s of walking out to my dad's old beat up blue Chevy pickup truck, and we're digging the seatbelts out from underneath the seat. And he's grumbling and he turns to me and says, "Well, I guess we have to wear these now." And even as a kid, I thought it was weird that he was frustrated that we had to wear seatbelts. That brings me to a podcast I listened to from my friend David Lee called the Black Manhattan Series. And he and Richard Bird, the man with the bow tie, were having a discussion around security, safety, multi-factor authentication, identity, really wide-ranging discussion. And one of Richard's comments really grabbed me. And he said, it's frustrating that our industry feels like they can't be prescriptive when there's so many regulations in other areas of our personal lives. And he brings up the airline industry and the automobile industry as two areas that we would all be, familiar with. And that made me reflect on my own personal experience with seatbelts. So I did some research. From the 1930s to the 50s, there was various ideas on restraints and safety belts of some sort, but things didn't really begin to move until 1958, when Niels Bohlin from Volvo invented the three-point harness. In 1966, the U.S. government created the National Highway Safety Bureau, which later changed its names. And in 1970, we enacted the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Act. And then things really took off, except they didn't. Why not? I think two factors are at play. Number one, individuals just weren't using seatbelts. The CDC data from that time period shows that only 11% of Americans were utilizing seatbelts. But in a research study at the same time, 86% of Americans said that seatbelts made cars safer. So rationally, they knew to explain that it was safer, but their actions didn't follow that behavior. That's the first thing that's at play. The second thing that's at play is the car manufacturers fought seatbelts, safety restraints, and safety in general. And that's fascinating. So from 1970 to 1983, almost nothing happens. And I think that's because the car manufacturing industry viewed it as a cost. The risk mitigation, the safety that we all inherently want, they viewed it as a cost and they fought against it. So what really moves things forward? In 1983, State Farm Insurance files a lawsuit. And it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court finds the State Farm's benefit. And that's when things start to move forward. By 1989, 6 years later, 34 states have a seatbelt law on the books. And by 1989, every state, except New Hampshire, has a seatbelt law. So now what's the research data show? The CDC shows that 68% of Americans were using seatbelts by that time period. So it took 16 years to go from 11% to 68% utilization. And I think those same two forces are at play when we look at cybersecurity. Number one, the individuals, the users, are reluctant to make changes. Even when we all would agree rationally that multi-factor authentication or authentication schemes are inherently safer, people are just not adopting them at the levels that you would rationally expect. And the second thing is there's a force that's sort of moving against that, or at least an inertia. And that's because I believe many enterprises view that risk mitigation, that safety, as a cost. And if you view it and you frame it as a cost, then there will always be forces that work against you. And so we have to move to a place where we see that as just intrinsically, it's something that we all need and we all agree on that. Or we have to reframe it and say, how can we as cybersecurity professionals help enable the business? If you can reframe it as enabling the business, then it's not this cost mitigation issue that you have to kind of justify. This is how we move forward, and this is how projects work, and these are the things that we need to do to be successful. So that's my thought on cybersecurity. I think those are the two factors that slow down the adoption, but I'd love to hear your views or counterpoints, and what other creative ideas do you have that we can use to move forward? Stay safe out there. Hit me up below.